Did you go to summer camp? I wasn't a summer camp kid myself. Well, actually, I went one summer and I never went back again. I went and got one of those chocolate chip cookie ice cream sandwiches for lunch every single day. I really cannot be left alone. I couldn't then and I can't now. But I know a lot of people were camp people. I went in elementary school, but middle school and high school, you know, those times are probably the most vulnerable, painful, and transformative years of any person's life. And activities like summer camp sort of offer a break from all that school anxiety. But these are no longer normal times, especially for school-age kids. We've seen what the left has done in schools across America. Well, in recent years, the mountains of Northern California have been grounds for leftist summer camps that push the diversity and inclusion agenda with horrendous, abusive activities. I'm talking separating kids based on race, assigning some to have various disabilities, instructing students to participate in humiliating activities and what can only be considered verbal assault. It sounds like a twisted psychological horror movie, but sadly, it's true. Every time the left gaslights conservatives by accusing us all of overreacting to how school officials interact with students, I can't help but think that, you know what? Maybe we're actually underreacting. I'm Alex Clark, and this is a brand new pop doc called I Know What You Did at Summer Camp. This story might take place at two California summer camps, Camp Everytown and Camp Diversity. But what happens in California tends to eventually spread everywhere. California is a trend-setting state when it comes to fashion, music, and everything else. You know, there actually may be one of these near your kids already. Have you ever heard of Camp Anytown? Camp Anytowns might be near you. They take place all over the country. They have for decades, and they are leftist camps for kids that operate under the guise of social justice. Well, Camp Diversity has been hosted by Silicon Valley faces. The group's mission statement says that it strives to create and promote an empathetic and inclusive community free of bias, bigotry, and violence. Get this, one of the ways they achieve their mission is through age-appropriate, experiential learning programs. Except there's absolutely nothing age-appropriate or appropriate at all about what has happened at this camp. In fact, there isn't a single age that is suitable for the vile tactic practiced by this camp. Back in 2017, Bay Area reporter Karen Desad decided to attend and report on the camps. For 4 days, around 60 students at a time were subjected to what could have been described as experiential learning methods. For one, the camp attendees were divided up based on sexuality, race, and ethnicity, and from there, a role-playing tactic ensued, and a child's category then determined the sort of insults he or she either received or directed towards others. The camp director was particularly aggressive in pushing uncomfortable students into using the foulest slurs they could think of. He called Middle Eastern students terrorists. LGBT students were deemed defective, along with a string of other infamously derogatory terms aimed at the community, and it didn't stop there. Asian students were generalized for being good at math. But the unhinged director of this camp suggested, you know what, I don't think that's really harsh enough for the Asian students. So he made staff accuse them of having tiny vaginas and small penises. Black students were not exempt from harsh stereotypes and racial slurs either. Jewish kids were deemed Christ killers and were asked if they were waiting for a train, while white kids were called privileged and racist supremacists. Every evil generalization was then written down on cards just to drive the knife in deeper to these students. The role-playing continued. White students were allowed to eat first at mealtime. Mexican students were required to pick up their dishes afterwards. There were restrooms labeled no Mexicans or dogs allowed and whites or coloreds only. Jewish kids were forced to wear yellow stars, and at Camp Everytown, immigrant students reenacted crossing the border, while minority students had to act out scenarios of being framed for drugs or even arrested. No one was safe. Back at Camp Diversity, some students were even labeled retarded or loners, and others were told to blindfold themselves to emulate being blind. And then, in each instance, these students were slapped on the back of the head or insulted for their fake disabilities. The students' internal struggles, the kind that should be addressed privately and with parental and professional guidance, were highlighted and weaponized against them during their stay. And to make things worse, Camp Diversity specifically hosted a gender night where kids once more needed to stereotype one another, this time with sexual slurs like slut or tramp. The camp director took it to the next level by recommending that in a sexual situation, no means yes and yes means harder. Other exercises forced students into admitting whether they'd battled depression or suicide suicidal feelings, and one by one, students were broken down into admissions of sexual, physical, and emotional assault or about their mental health struggles. Children reportedly sobbed or even, in some instances, collapsed. Staff was then told to probe the emotionally distraught students even more once the students were back at their cabins. Could you imagine going to summer camp where every activity is either you serving your friends, being mocked for your race, or being verbally assaulted in front of everyone, and then when you think it's over at the end of the day, your camp counselor stirs the pot even more? This is the epitome of abuse, and it is disgusting. Predators are famous for learning a child's vulnerabilities and then weaponizing them against the victim. So why are students reportedly told to keep the experience hush-hush so they don't spoil it for the next campers? This screams predator. If the camp director and counselors had nothing to hide, why tell students not to talk about it? This is why conservatives should be louder than ever about these types of institutions, these summer camps, the classes that kids are being forced to take at school. The next time someone tells you that you're overreacting about what's happening to our kids in this country, point to the facts. The fact is, children should not be traumatized at school or summer camp, and camp counselors should support their students, not inspire hate. And pushing segregation to teach kids about race is wrong. At the end of the day, I will never understand how encouraging racist, sexist, discriminating behavior will solve racial issues. If anything, summer camps devoted to breaking kids down in the name of diversity and inclusion will only further divide and destroy the lives of young Americans. All right, well, if you made it to the end of this episode, despite how horrific it was, please give this a heart and a thumbs up, depending on where you're watching. Comment what you think about this. Share it to your stories. Ask people if they know about these leftist indoctrination summer camps that are going on. Hit the save button. We really do need to give more attention to these woke camps. It's pop culture without the propaganda every single day. I'm Alex Clark, and this is POPlitics.
Clearly, POPlitics is best served visually, but you can also listen to POPlitics if you just want the audio. Subscribe to us anywhere you get your podcasts: Apple, Spotify, iHeart, TuneIn, and more. Also, make sure that if you are listening to the podcast version, you leave us a 5-star review, and don't forget, subscribe to POPlitics on YouTube.